This week, global markets fell after steep U.S. tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico went into effect, and as the possible ramifications of a global trade war set in. So what is next? Jim Rickards, best-selling author of Currency Wars and many other books, joins us today. Jim, there is talk right now that some exceptions and delays are coming into play. The White House announcing that it would grant a one-month delay, for example, on tariffs on automakers. But overall, what's your take on what's next on the trade war front?
Well, it's a very big deal, as you point out. Canada in particular is interesting. It's really as far as Canada and the U.S. are concerned, and to a great extent Mexico and the U.S., although there are other issues in Mexico. It's mostly about the auto industry. Lumber matters, steel imports matter, although that has more to do with China. But I lived in Montreal for 2 years, and I used to go to the liquor store. And Trudeau said, "Well, if the U.S. puts tariffs on Canada, we're stripping all the American liquor from the shelves." Well, they didn't happen. I mean, you can't get California wine in a Montreal liquor store. It was French. You can get French wine and other kinds of wine. I also live in New England. You can't get Vermont cheese in Canada. There was the number of U.S. exports that Canada banned: cheese, dairy, wine, liquor, etc., with few exceptions. They weren't buying that much from the U.S. anyway. Auto industry is different. That's a huge deal, and that's really what this was all about. And that's why Trump gave a 30-day extension. He didn't say, "I'm rescinding the tariffs." He just put them on the other day, a couple of days ago. But he said, "Well, we'll put them on. We'll hit the pause button for 30 days while we talk." It's a reasonable approach. We'll see what happens. But of course, China was in the crosshairs. China's not getting a pause. Mexico is. So we'll keep talking. We, meaning the U.S., we'll keep talking to Canada and Mexico. The EU's next. They're gonna get whacked. Whether it's 10% or 25%, I mean, it matters, but it's a significant percentage. But Trump's putting tariffs on, pretty much everyone in the world. The Canadian case is interesting. Canada is the U.S.'s largest trading partner by volume. You look at the volume of trade, but the trade deficit, or the U.S. trade deficit with Canada, or Canada's surplus, is not the biggest by any means. I think it's 9th or 10th. So it's the largest trading relationship by volume, but it's not the biggest trade deficit that the U.S. runs. Actually, the United States has a much bigger trade deficit, much bigger with Vietnam. I mean, who's talking about Vietnam? Well, we'll be talking to them, and they might get the same treatment. But like I said, it's really about the auto industry and subsidies, and it's very popular with the U.S. auto workers in Detroit and elsewhere, obviously.
Which begs the question, Jim. I mean, from what I've learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, the president cannot just use tariff powers, evoke tariff powers. That hence the national threat of fentanyl, and that way President Trump was able to use the tariff. So my question to you is, do you believe the fentanyl story? Is that really the true motivation? He's cited over 300,000 deaths to fentanyl, or do you think there's more to the story?
There's more to the story. The fentanyl issue is real, and it's coming in from Mexico and is coming in from Canada. It originates in China. This is just a replay of the Opium Wars of the 1840s, where the British went in guns blazing and attacked Hong Kong to force the Chinese to take opium. Well, here we are 150 years later or more, and the Chinese are saying, "Here's your payback. We're going to give you fentanyl." And fentanyl is very destructive to, it kills, the people say 100,000 a year. Is probably a lot more than that. I know fentanyl victims. I know people who died of overdoses. So it's very real. It does give Trump a legal handle. But it's not the only handle. It's just not true that Trump needs to go to Congress on this. You're right about the fentanyl exemption, national security exemption, but there are a lot of exemptions already in law that give the president the ability to put these tariffs on. So it's not just a magic wand. He can wave it and say, "You get tariffs." They have to, there's Section 230, the U.S. Trade Act, there are other provisions. And then the big one, the big club, is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of I think it was 1978. It could be off by a year, but International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, which gives the president dictatorial powers, I'm using dictator in the good sense of the word, meaning you can just do what you want, when it comes to financial and economic matters where there is a national security implication. Now, that's not hard to find these days. I mean, there's everything with globalization and trade in particular, there's always an international implication to it. National security or jobs part of national security. I would say, yeah, if you exploited all your jobs and your economy suffering, that undermines national security. And that is the main law that all presidents, President Trump, but President Biden also, while President Biden was busy putting sanctions on Russia over the Ukraine war and secondary sanctions on China, people didn't seem to have a big problem with that, but that was all this IEPA, as I call it, it's kind of the nickname. That's always the statute they use. If you read the Treasury Department releases, which I do, they always cite that statute. So I would say you're right that you can't just do whatever you want, but the authority is so broad that, in effect, Trump can put these tariffs on. He did it in his first term. A lot of the supply chain problems that we saw in 2021 and 2022, people were blaming COVID. Now, COVID played a part, but you can trace the origin of that pre-COVID to 2018, which is when the trade war really started. And the data shows that those original tariffs on China had much more to do with disrupting the supply chain than COVID.
Just one more point on the tariffs front, correlated to gold. Would gold fall under the tariffs? That's a question that many people have been asking. I know he said we're going to do everything. Nothing is exempt, even though there are some rollbacks now. Would gold be affected? And just one more point, Bloomberg putting out an article this morning saying that we're seeing extreme price dislocations on gold are fading as tightness in the physical market has seemed to ease, indicating this rush to ship bullion to America may have run its course. So 2 points there. Would gold be affected by the tariffs? What do you think? And two, was that the reason that we saw this rush of gold from London to New York, from Switzerland now to New York?
Gold might be affected by the tariffs. It's like Trump put these tariffs on. They applied to everything. Now he's creating carve-outs, as he said. The auto industry, they're getting a 30-day pause, but the tariffs are extremely broad, so they would apply to gold in the first instance, unless he carved it out, which he hasn't. Having said that, it won't have any effect on the global price of gold. The reason is that gold is kind of like oil, gold, a couple other things. These are global prices. They're produced all over the world, not everywhere, but in every part of the world. They're consumed in every part of the world, and they're easily substituted. So if the U.S. doesn't buy oil from Saudi Arabia, we don't buy that much from Saudi Arabia anyway. We can buy from Venezuela. If Canada cuts us off, we can buy more from Mexico or more from Venezuela. But the same is true of gold. The price is set in two places: the London bullion market and the COMEX, the New York commodities market. And physical prices and paper gold prices vary. There's a lot to it. But my point being, if there's a tariff on gold coming from Canada to the U.S., we'll just buy it in Shanghai, buy it from Africa, buy it from Switzerland. The point being, when a commodity is truly generic, a car is not generic. You get a certain brand and a certain set of features, and it's electric or hybrid or whatever. Cars are not generic. Gold is. It's an element, atomic number 79. So the point being, when you have a generic, fungible global commodity, tariffs don't affect the price, because if you're getting hit with a tariff, you just don't buy it from that source, you buy it from somewhere else. Now, getting back to your other point, Danielle, about shipments from gold, yeah, it does appear that there was some kind of short squeeze emerging, and that shorts were having trouble getting physical gold to satisfy deliveries. Now, that can only go so far. If you look at, say, how do you get short gold? You sell gold futures on the COMEX, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months forward, and then you get to the end of the contract, and the buyer says, "I would like physical delivery, please. I don't just want to pair off or roll over my contract. That's a paper transaction. That's the way most futures settle. But if someone long the future says, I'd like to take delivery, please," then yeah, you got to look at the warehouse and see what's there, and if there's not enough, you might have to get it from London or some other source. Now, that appears to account for some of the deliveries and some of the urgency about that. Having said that, there's a limit on that, and you have to read the COMEX rule book. I'm enough of a geek. I actually have read the COMEX rule book, but there are two important rules. Number one, they have a rule that says they can change the rules. So if things get tight or things get disorderly, they can just say sorry. No more physical delivery. We're trading for liquidation only. You can pay off your contract, roll it over, but you can't take physical delivery. They can just say that. And it is what they did to the Hunt brothers in 1980, I believe, 80 or 81, when they tried to corner the silver market. But there's another principle, which is also in the rule book, but it's just more broadly stated. Futures exchanges say, all of them say, we are not a source of supply. Now, it is true that you can provide notice and take physical delivery of the gold in a futures contract. That is true. But they only want a little sliver of that just to kind of keep the paper price and the physical price in line by linking it to the physical price through physical delivery. In some cases, there's a little bit of an arbitrage, but not much. It basically keeps those two prices in line. That's the purpose of it. If all the shorts, all the longs got together and all put in notice of physical delivery, I promise you, by noon that day, the COMEX would say, sorry, trade for liquidation only. You cannot take physical delivery. We are not a source of supply. So this notion, a lot of gold bugs have it, that somehow you could use the futures exchanges to break the market. No, you can't. Only to a point. So. And it may be, I haven't seen any evidence that gold was being shipped to beat the tariffs. And we haven't even put tariffs on the UK or Switzerland. We probably will, or at least the UK, but not yet. And so I think there might have been a mild short squeeze unfolding, and that accounts for the physical deliveries. But that's not going to go too far because the futures exchanges can shut it down.